3:15 p.m., the uneasy quiet along the Donetsk-Luhansk frontier was torn apart by thunder. The calm of the evening shattered as the Russian Federation unleashed one of the most powerful combined arms assaults of the war. The sky lit up with fire, and the ground shook beneath a storm of rockets and missiles. It was a scene of sheer violence designed to break Ukraine's defenses in a single, decisive blow. The assault began with an enormous artillery barrage. Dozens of BM-30 Smerch multiple-launch rocket systems fired in unison, their 300mm rockets screaming through the air like fiery comets. Each rocket weighed over 800 pounds, carrying warheads packed with high explosives and deadly submunitions. They rained down on Ukrainian defensive belts with terrifying force. Bunkers were torn apart, artillery positions obliterated, and radar sites silenced in a matter of minutes. The constant pounding created a rolling thunder that shook the earth, a relentless drumbeat of destruction meant to smash anything that stood in the way. But that was only the beginning. From deeper positions, Russian forces launched 40 Iskander short-range ballistic missiles. Rising on pillars of flame, they accelerated to hypersonic speeds, making them nearly impossible to stop. Their warheads slammed into Ukrainian supply hubs, ammunition depots, and command centers. Explosions ripped through the rear, sending shockwaves that shattered windows miles away and towering plumes of smoke into the air. In less than half an hour, Russia had poured hundreds of millions of dollars of firepower into a single strike. The purpose was clear: blind Ukraine's sensors, sever its logistics, and open a breach for a massive ground assault. It was the embodiment of Russia's deep battle doctrine, overwhelming firepower meant to paralyze the defender before the tanks even began to roll. Under this cover of fire, Russian engineers moved forward. 20 UR-77 mine-clearing vehicles crept towards the Ukrainian lines, each capable of launching a hose packed with explosives across suspected minefields. When detonated, these line charges blew open safe lanes, 100 meters long, 6 meters wide, just enough for tanks to pass through. The battlefield shook again as the detonations ripped the ground apart, carving corridors for the armored spearhead waiting just behind. Then came the main force. 55 of Russia's most advanced T-90M tanks surged forward, their reactive armor glinting in the fading light. Each was armed with a 125mm smoothbore cannon. This was a steel fist worth over $1.1 billion in equipment alone. Moscow believed this would be the decisive breakthrough, a hammer blow that would shatter Ukrainian defenses and deliver a swift victory. But Ukraine was ready. General Alexander Syrsky had studied Russia's tactics for years. He knew that meeting such an assault head-on was suicide. Instead, his forces had built a flexible defense in depth. They would not try to hold the first line against the inevitable storm. Instead, they allowed the Russians to advance into carefully prepared engagement zones, hidden pockets of death, designed to lure in armored formations and destroy them from every angle. For weeks, Ukrainian troops had been preparing the terrain. 40 American-supplied M270 rocket systems and 48 HIMARS launchers were dispersed and camouflaged in forests, flanking the likely routes of advance. Their GPS-guided rockets were already preloaded with coordinates of Russian approach lanes. 12 F-16 fighters patrolled, ready to strike helicopters and provide targeting data. Special forces, armed with javelins and stingers, lay hidden in tree lines, waiting for the moment the Russian tanks moved deep into the trap. At 5:42 p.m., disaster struck the Russian column. One of the mine-clearing vehicles launched its charge over what it thought was a Ukrainian minefield, but buried there was something far worse, an unmarked Ukrainian ammunition cache. The sympathetic detonation was colossal. The explosion vaporized 10 Russian vehicles instantly, flinging burning wreckage across the field and creating a crater the size of a football pitch. In his bunker, General Syrsky gave a single order: hold fire. Let the Russians believe they had struck a Ukrainian position. Let them keep coming. Minutes later, the trap was sprung. From the skies, the 12 F-16 seconds dropped into attack runs, firing volleys of AMRAAM missiles. 7 Russian Ka-52 attack helicopters, which had been spotting targets for the ground advance, were blown out of the air in seconds. Without them, the Russian tanks lost their eyes. Then came the rocket artillery. 96 HIMARS rockets screamed overhead, arching toward the clustered T-90s. In less than 5 minutes, 22 Russian tanks were gone. Russian commanders tried desperately to respond. Their rocket launchers shifted fire, unleashing retaliatory salvos toward suspected Ukrainian artillery positions. One barrage did hit a Ukrainian command post, killing 3 soldiers. But it was too little, too late. Ukraine's M270 batteries answered with their own rockets, saturating the Russian staging grounds. Russia had already lost nearly a third of its armored force, and then Ukraine's special forces revealed themselves. From the forests, teams armed with javelins fired into the flanks of the stalled columns. One after another, tanks burst into flames. 7 more were destroyed within minutes. Russian VDV troops tried to hold the line, firing Kornet missiles back at Ukrainian positions. They managed to destroy 1 Ukrainian armored vehicle, but their isolated successes could not turn the tide. The battlefield had become a killing ground. By 6:20, the assault was in total chaos. HIMARS and M270 rockets continued to pound the rear echelons, striking ammunition trucks and fuel convoys. Secondary explosions erupted like volcanoes, towering fireballs lighting up the dusk sky. Command posts were systematically targeted, killing senior officers and cutting communication with frontline units. With leadership gone and formations shattered, Russian troops were reduced to small, scattered pockets of resistance. F-16s strafed retreating infantry with 20mm cannons, forcing soldiers to dive into ditches for cover. Every attempt to regroup was met with another precision strike. Ukrainian special forces pushed forward, picking off surviving tanks with javelins, their top attack warheads slicing through even the most advanced Russian armor. By 6:30, fewer than 20 of the original 55 T-90s were still operational. Desperation set in. Russian artillery fired over 400 shells in a frantic 15 minutes, but without spotters, their aim was wild. Most shells landed harmlessly in empty fields. The battlefield was now a scene of utter destruction. Burning hulks of tanks, wrecked personnel carriers, and scattered bodies of once elite soldiers. By 6:45 p.m., the Russian spearhead was broken. More than 350 troops were dead or wounded. Hundreds more were surrounded and forced to surrender. At 7 p.m., Ukraine delivered the final blow. A coordinated strike from HIMARS and M270 systems obliterated the primary Russian field command and post, killing several senior officers. Leaderless, shattered, and surrounded, the remaining Russian units laid down their arms. What Moscow had intended as a decisive breakthrough had instead become one of its most humiliating defeats. In less than 2 hours, a $1.1 billion armored army had been reduced to smoking wreckage. The battlefield was littered with destroyed T-90s, charred vehicles, and abandoned equipment. Ukraine's strategy had worked perfectly. Patience, deception, and precision had turned overwhelming Russian force into a liability. This battle was more than just a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of the new reality of modern warfare, that intelligence, preparation, and precision-guided munitions can devastate even the most powerful armored assaults. For Russia, the defeat was catastrophic. For Ukraine, it was proof that with the right strategy and the right tools, even a numerically superior enemy can be destroyed. And as images of burning tanks and captured paratroopers spread across the world, one truth was clear: the balance of this war is shifting, and the cost of underestimating Ukraine is higher than ever before. If you found this breakdown powerful and want to stay updated with more real frontline stories and deep analysis, don't forget to subscribe, tap the notification bell, and join us for the next episode.